Elena Martinez thought she knew what family meant until $50 million taught her the truth about the people she'd trusted her entire life. What started as a simple white lie to protect herself from gold diggers became the most revealing experiment of her life, exposing betrayals so deep they changed everything she believed about love, loyalty, and blood relations. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena Martinez had always lived modestly. At 28, she worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm in Portland, Oregon, sharing a cramped apartment with her roommate Mia and driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic that made suspicious rattling sounds on cold mornings. Her biggest financial concern was whether she could afford to splurge on organic vegetables at the grocery store. That ordinary Tuesday in March changed everything when the call came from Harrison and Associates, a law firm she'd never heard of in Sacramento, California. Miss Martinez, this is regarding the estate of Vivian Castellanos, the attorney said in a measured tone. I believe she was your great aunt on your mother's side. Elena frowned, trying to place the name. Her mother Rosa had mentioned various relatives over the years, but most of the family had been scattered across different states, and Elena had met only a handful of them. She vaguely remembered an elderly woman at her cousin's wedding years ago, someone who had pressed a $20 bill into her hand and told her to buy something nice for herself. I'm afraid I don't know much about her, Elena admitted. That's understandable. Miss Castellanos was quite private about her affairs. However, she has named you as the sole beneficiary of her estate. We'll need you to come to Sacramento for the reading of the will and to discuss the transfer of assets. Elena assumed it might be a small inheritance, perhaps enough to pay off her student loans or put a down payment on a car that didn't require prayer to start each morning. She requested time off work and made the 4-hour drive south, expecting to spend a few hours handling paperwork and maybe learning more about this mysterious great aunt. The law office occupied an entire floor of a gleaming downtown building, its waiting room decorated with expensive artwork and furniture that whispered of serious money. Elena felt underdressed in her department store blouse and pants, her scuffed ballet flats clicking nervously against the marble floor. Mr. Harrison, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, welcomed her into his office with a warm handshake. The wall behind his desk displayed numerous certificates and awards, suggesting this wasn't a firm that handled small estates. Miss Martinez, please have a seat. I have to say, your great-aunt was quite a remarkable woman. She built a considerable fortune through real estate investments over several decades. Elena nodded politely, still expecting modest numbers, perhaps a few $1,000s, maybe enough for a nice vacation. Mr. Harrison opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. Your great-aunt's estate has been valued at approximately $52 million. The words hung in the air like a foreign language Elena couldn't quite translate. She stared at the attorney, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry, did you say 52,000? Million, Mr. Harrison repeated gently. $52 million. Elena's vision went slightly fuzzy around the edges. She gripped the arms of the leather chair, afraid she might faint. That can't be right. There has to be some mistake. Mr. Harrison slid a document across the desk toward her. I assure you, everything has been thoroughly verified. Your great-aunt accumulated this wealth through strategic property investments beginning in the 1970s. She owned commercial buildings, apartment complexes, and undeveloped land across California, Nevada, and Arizona. She also maintained substantial investment portfolios. Elena stared at the papers, but the numbers seemed to swim before her. But why me? I barely knew her. According to her personal notes, which she left sealed with her will, she had been observing her family members from a distance for many years. She was particularly impressed by your character, your work ethic, and the fact that you'd never asked anyone for financial help, despite struggling with student loans and starting your career. The attorney pulled out a handwritten letter bearing Elena's name in elegant cursive. She left this for you. With trembling fingers, Elena opened the envelope. The letter was written on expensive stationery in the same careful handwriting. My dear Elena, if you are reading this, I have passed on and left you with quite a surprise. I know we did not know each other well, but I have been watching you from afar, proud of the woman you have become. Your mother often shared updates about your life during our infrequent phone calls, though she never knew the extent of my circumstances. I chose you as my heir because you have demonstrated integrity, kindness, and independence. You work hard for what you have and treat others with respect regardless of their status. In a family where many members have always been quick to ask for money or favors, you never once reached out with your hand extended. This wealth comes with great responsibility. I trust you will use it wisely, not just for yourself, but to make a positive impact on the world. Be careful whom you trust with this information. Money has a way of revealing people's true nature, and you may be surprised by what you discover. I hope this gift brings you freedom to pursue your dreams and the wisdom to understand that true wealth lies not in what we accumulate, but in how we choose to live. With love and faith in your future, Aunt Vivian. Elena read the letter twice, her hands still shaking. The woman she barely remembered had been quietly watching her life unfold, making careful notes about her character. It felt surreal, like being chosen by a fairy godmother she'd never known existed. Mr. Harrison explained the practical aspects with patient thoroughness. The estate included multiple properties generating substantial rental income, diversified investment portfolios, and several $1 million in liquid assets. There would be taxes to consider, but even after all obligations were met, Elena would inherit more money than most people earned in multiple lifetimes. I understand this is overwhelming, he said kindly. I'd recommend taking time to process this information before making any major decisions. You might also want to consider hiring a financial advisor and perhaps keeping the inheritance private until you've had time to adjust. Elena nodded numbly. The idea of keeping it secret felt wise, though she couldn't yet articulate why. Something in her great-aunt's letter about money revealing people's true nature resonated with an instinctive wariness she hadn't known she possessed. The drive back to Portland passed in a blur of confused thoughts and disbelief. She kept expecting to wake up and discover the entire experience had been an elaborate dream. But the thick folder of documents on her passenger seat remained stubbornly real, filled with bank statements and property deeds that transformed her from a struggling graphic designer into one of the wealthiest women in Oregon. Elena parked outside her modest apartment building and sat in her car for a long time, watching neighbors return from work and wondering if her life would ever feel normal again. A part of her wanted to call someone immediately to share this incredible news with the people closest to her, but her great-aunt's warning echoed in her mind, and she decided to wait. That evening, she sat at her small kitchen table, spreading the documents across the surface, while Mia watched television in the living room. The numbers still seemed impossible. Rental income alone from the property portfolio exceeded what Elena earned in an entire year at her job. The investment accounts had been growing steadily for decades, managed by professionals who had apparently worked miracles with compound interest. Elena thought about her family and how they would react to this news. Her parents, Carlos and Rosa, had always struggled financially. Her father worked construction while her mother cleaned houses, both jobs that were hard on their bodies and provided little security. They'd sacrificed to help Elena through college, often going without so she could have textbooks and supplies. Her younger brother Miguel, 25, was still living at home, drifting between part-time jobs and showing little ambition to establish independence. Her parents frequently gave him money for various expenses, from car repairs to nights out with friends, enabling his lackadaisical approach to adult responsibility. Elena's sister Carmen, 31, was married with 2 children and constantly complaining about money troubles. She and her husband, Derek, lived beyond their means, regularly asking family members for loans that were rarely repaid. Carmen had a talent for making her financial problems seem like emergencies that required immediate family intervention. Then there was Elena's best friend since childhood, Sofia Reyes. They'd grown up on the same street, navigated school together, and maintained their friendship despite taking different paths after graduation. Sofia worked as a teacher and often expressed frustration about her low salary and the challenges of making ends meet on an educator's income. As Elena considered each relationship, she realized she'd never seen any of these people truly tested by circumstances involving significant money. Would they love her the same way if she remained the struggling graphic designer they'd always known? Or would $50 million change how they saw her, treated her, and related to her? An idea began forming in her mind, initially seeming almost cruel, but gradually feeling necessary. What if she didn't tell them about the inheritance right away? What if she continued living as she always had, at least temporarily, to see how these relationships existed without the complication of her newfound wealth? The more Elena thought about it, the more the idea appealed to her. She could take some time to adjust to her new circumstances privately while observing whether the people in her life valued her for herself or would treat her differently if they knew about the money. Her great aunt had specifically warned her to be careful about whom to trust with this information. Elena decided to conduct what she privately termed an experiment. She would continue living in her apartment, going to work, and maintaining her modest lifestyle, while secretly beginning to understand her inheritance and plan for the future. She would tell her family and friends that she was still struggling financially, perhaps even more than before, to see how they responded when they believed she needed help rather than when they might want something from her. The plan felt deceptive, and Elena spent several sleepless nights wondering if she was being unfair to people who genuinely cared about her. But something deeper than conscious reasoning urged her to proceed with caution. Perhaps it was intuition, or maybe wisdom inherited from a great aunt who had learned hard lessons about money and family during her own lifetime. Elena met with Mr. Harrison again the following week, this time accompanied by the financial advisor he'd recommended, a woman named Margaret Chen who specialized in managing substantial inheritances. They developed a strategy for handling the estate that would allow Elena to maintain her current lifestyle while the investments continue to grow under professional management. Many people in your situation make the mistake of dramatically changing their lifestyle immediately, Margaret explained. Taking time to adjust psychologically to this kind of wealth is actually quite wise. It allows you to make thoughtful decisions rather than impulsive ones. Elena felt validated in her choice to keep the inheritance secret, at least temporarily. She would continue working at the marketing firm, living in her shared apartment, and driving her unreliable car while privately learning to understand the responsibility that came with her great-aunt's gift. The first real test came sooner than expected. Elena's mother called on a Thursday evening, her voice tight with worry. "Mija, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Are you eating enough? Your father and I have been talking, and we're worried about how thin you looked last time we saw you." Elena had indeed lost some weight recently, though it was due to stress from the inheritance revelation rather than lack of food. But her mother's concern touched her heart. "I'm fine, Mama, just been busy with work." "I know things have been tight for you since you moved out. If you need groceries or anything, you know your father and I can help a little bit." The offer was typical of her parents, who had so little themselves but were always willing to share what they had with their children. Elena felt a pang of guilt about deceiving them, but also a warm recognition of their genuine love and concern. "Thank you, but I'm managing okay," Elena said. "How are things with you and Dad?" Rosa sighed. "The usual struggles. Your father's back has been bothering him again, and we're worried about him missing work. You know how construction is. They don't keep people who can't keep up. And Miguel asked us for money again yesterday. His car needs new tires." Elena listened to her mother's familiar litany of financial concerns, realizing she was hearing them with different ears now. Every worry her mother expressed could be solved easily with Elena's inheritance, yet she remained silent about her ability to help. The deception felt heavier with each passing word. "I wish I could help more," Elena said, which was true in a complicated way. "Don't you worry about us, Mija. You focus on taking care of yourself. That's what parents are for, to worry about these things so you don't have to." After the call ended, Elena sat staring at her phone, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake by keeping her secret. Her parents were genuinely struggling, dealing with real hardships that she could alleviate instantly. But something held her back, a need to understand the full scope of her relationships before money entered the equation and potentially change everything. The following weekend brought the first major test of her experiment. Elena's sister Carmen called in tears, explaining that Derek had lost his job unexpectedly and they were facing eviction from their apartment. The landlord had already served notice, and they had less than 2 weeks to come up with 3 months' worth of back rent or find a new place to live with 2 small children. "I've called everyone," Carmen sobbed into the phone. "Mom and Dad don't have anything extra. Miguel is broke as usual. I don't know what we're going to do. The kids don't understand why we might have to move, and I can't bear the thought of them being homeless." Elena's heart ached listening to her sister's desperation. 3 months of rent for Carmen's family would represent a tiny fraction of Elena's inheritance, an amount she could provide without even noticing the financial impact. But she forced herself to maintain her role.
Carmen, I'm so sorry. I wish I could help, but you know how tight things have been for me, too. I'm barely making my own rent right now. I know, Carmen said, her voice breaking. I just don't know where else to turn. Could you maybe lend us a few $100s? Anything would help. Elena felt physically ill lying to her sister during such a crisis. I'm sorry, but I really don't have anything extra. Maybe you could talk to Derek's family.
His parents already said no. They think we're irresponsible with money and that helping us would just enable bad decisions. After the call, Elena paced her small apartment, questioning every aspect of her decision to keep the inheritance secret. Her sister was facing potential homelessness with 2 children, and Elena had the power to solve the problem instantly. What kind of person sat on $50 million while her family suffered? But another voice in her head, one that sounded suspiciously like her great-aunt's letter, whispered that this crisis would reveal important truths about her family dynamics. If Elena immediately solved Carmen's financial problems, would she learn anything about her sister's character or their relationship? Or would she simply become the family's new source of emergency funds, called upon whenever anyone made poor decisions or encountered difficulties? Elena compromised with her conscience by anonymously sending a money order for $2,000 to Carmen's landlord, enough to buy them some time without revealing her identity as the source. She told herself she was still conducting her experiment while ensuring her niece and nephew wouldn't become homeless. When Carmen called 2 days later, her voice bright with relief, Elena felt both satisfaction and continued guilt. "The most amazing thing happened," Carmen said. "The landlord called and said someone had made a partial payment on our account. He wouldn't say who, but it gives us more time to figure things out. Derek is applying for jobs every day, and I'm looking into cleaning houses like Mom used to do." Elena listened to her sister's gratitude and renewed determination, wondering if the anonymous help had provided breathing room for growth or simply postponed an inevitable reckoning with financial reality. She was beginning to understand that having the power to solve other people's problems created moral dilemmas she'd never anticipated. The experiment was teaching her as much about herself as about others. Every day brought new challenges to maintaining her secret while observing how people treated her when they believed she had nothing extra to give. Some interactions surprised her with their genuine warmth and selflessness. Others revealed undercurrents of resentment or expectation she'd never noticed before. Elena's coworker Jake, who had always been friendly, began making subtle comments about her thrift store clothes and generic brand lunch items. "Must be nice not to care about appearances," he said one day, his tone suggesting the opposite of admiration. Elena realized that Jake had previously respected what he'd seen as her financial success and independence. Now that he perceived her as struggling, his attitude had shifted to subtle condescension. Conversely, Mia, her roommate, had become more generous and protective. She often cooked extra food and insisted Elena share her meals. She covered Elena's portion of utilities one month when Elena pretended to be short on funds, refusing to accept repayment and dismissing Elena's gratitude with genuine kindness. "We look out for each other," Mia said simply. "That's what friends do." These small revelations accumulated daily, creating a complex picture of how money influenced every relationship in Elena's life, even when the amounts involved were relatively small. She began to understand why her great-aunt had warned her about money revealing people's true nature. 3 weeks into her experiment, Elena's best friend, Sophia, suggested they meet for their monthly coffee date. They'd maintained this tradition since college, usually spending Saturday mornings catching up on each other's lives at a small cafe near Elena's apartment. Sophia arrived looking polished and put together, her teacher's salary apparently stretching to cover regular hair appointments and clothes that Elena now realized were more expensive than she'd previously noticed. They ordered their usual drinks and settled into a corner table, but something felt different about Sophia's demeanor. "You look tired," Sophia said, studying Elena's face with concern that seemed genuine. "Are you taking care of yourself?" Elena had been careful to maintain her appearance, not wanting to worry anyone unnecessarily, but the stress of keeping such a massive secret while conducting her social experiment was undoubtedly taking a toll. "Just work stress," she said. "You know how it is." Sophia nodded sympathetically. "I've been thinking about your situation lately. It must be really hard struggling to make ends meet while watching everyone else seem to get ahead.
I mean, I complain about teacher pay, but at least I have job security and good benefits. The comment struck Elena as odd. Sophia had never previously characterized Elena's life as particularly difficult compared to her own. In fact, Sophia had often expressed envy about Elena's creative career and freedom from the bureaucracy of public education. I'm doing okay, Elena said carefully. Not rich, but managing. Of course, Sophia said quickly. I just meant that it's admirable how you never complain or ask for help, even when things are tight. Some people would be constantly whining about their problems or hitting up friends for loans. Elena sipped her coffee, wondering if Sophia's comments contained an implicit criticism of others in their social circle or a subtle probe about Elena's financial situation. I've never been comfortable asking for money, she said honestly. That's what I respect about you. But if you ever really needed help, I hope you'd feel comfortable coming to me. I mean, I can't offer much on a teacher's salary, but friends should support each other. The offer seemed sincere, yet something about Sophia's tone suggested she didn't expect Elena to take her up on it. Elena found herself analyzing every word and inflection, wondering if she was becoming paranoid or if her new perspective was revealing subtle dynamics that had always existed beneath the surface of their friendship. As their conversation continued, Sophia steered the discussion toward money and success more frequently than Elena remembered from previous coffee dates. She talked about her frustration with low teacher pay, her envy of friends who had chosen more lucrative careers, and her dreams of someday having enough money to travel and buy nice things. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just not worry about money, Sophia said wistfully, to be able to buy whatever you want without checking your bank account first. Must be nice for people who inherit money or win the lottery. Elena nearly choked on her coffee. Do you think about that often, suddenly coming into money? Who doesn't? I probably spend too much time fantasizing about what I'd do with a big windfall. Pay off my student loans, buy a house, travel to Europe, help my family. Sophia laughed. Listen to me, dreaming about problems I'll never have. What about you? Ever fantasize about being rich? The irony was almost overwhelming. Elena was living Sophia's fantasy while pretending to share her friend's financial struggles. I try not to think about it too much, she said. Seems like a waste of energy to dream about things that probably won't happen. You're so practical, Sophia said, with what might have been admiration or mild criticism. I guess that's why you're better at managing money than I am, even though we both struggle. Elena was beginning to realize that her experiment was revealing layers of complexity in her relationships that she'd never suspected. Every interaction now carried potential significance. Every comment about money or success seemed loaded with meaning she was probably overanalyzing but couldn't ignore. The most challenging test came a month after she'd learned about her inheritance, when Elena's family gathered for her father's birthday dinner at her parents' modest home. The small house where she'd grown up felt even more cramped with all the adults present, and Elena noticed details she'd previously overlooked. The worn carpet, the appliances that were clearly past their prime, the way her parents apologetically served a simple meal they'd stretched to feed everyone. Miguel arrived late as usual, complaining about his job search and hinting broadly about needing gas money to get to interviews. Carmen and Derek's marriage showed visible strain from their ongoing financial problems, despite the anonymous assistance Elena had provided. Derek barely spoke during dinner, his jaw tight with what Elena recognized as the particular frustration of a man who felt unable to provide for his family. After dinner, while the women cleaned dishes and the men watched television, Elena found herself alone in the kitchen with her mother and Carmen.
The conversation naturally drifted to money troubles, as it often did when the family gathered. I don't know how we're going to manage Christmas this year, Rosa said quietly, her voice heavy with worry. The kids are expecting presents, but between your father's back problems affecting his work hours and everything else. Carmen nodded sympathetically. Tell me about it. The kids keep asking about things they want, and I hate having to disappoint them constantly. Sometimes I wonder if Derek and I should have waited longer before having children, until we were more financially stable. Elena listened to their conversation while mechanically drying dishes, her heart breaking for real struggles that she could solve so easily. But she also found herself noticing patterns she'd missed before. Carmen's financial problems seemed to follow cycles of poor decision-making, followed by family emergency appeals. Miguel's joblessness appeared to be more about lack of motivation than lack of opportunity. Even her parents, whom she loved dearly, had developed habits of financial enabling that might not serve anyone well in the long term. "What about you, Elena?" Rosa asked. "How are you managing? You've been so quiet lately." All eyes turned to Elena, and she felt the weight of her deception acutely. These were the people who had loved and supported her throughout her life, and she was lying to them about the most significant thing that had ever happened to her. "I'm getting by," she said carefully. "Work is steady, even if it doesn't pay much." Carmen studied her sister's face. "You know, if you ever needed to move back home for a while to save money, there's always room here. It might be crowded, but family takes care of family." The offer was made with genuine love, and Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Her family was struggling, but still willing to share what little they had with her. It was both beautiful and heartbreaking, especially knowing that she was deceiving them about her true circumstances. "Thank you," Elena managed. "It means a lot to know I have that option." But even as she was moved by their generosity, Elena noticed other dynamics playing out in the conversation. When Carmen talked about her financial troubles, there was an expectation in her tone that others would offer solutions or assistance. When Miguel eventually joined them in the kitchen and mentioned needing money for job interview expenses, his request was directed toward their parents rather than his sisters, suggesting established patterns of financial dependency. Elena began to see her family's economic struggles within a larger framework of decisions, expectations, and relationships that had developed over many years. Simply injecting money into these dynamics might not solve the underlying issues and could potentially create new problems or resentments. As the evening wound down and family members began to leave, Elena found herself walking to her car with Sophia, who had been invited to join the family celebration as she often was. "Your family is going through a rough patch," Sophia observed as they reached Elena's car. "It's hard watching people you love struggle, especially when there's not much you can do to help." Elena nodded, appreciating what seemed like genuine sympathy. But then Sophia continued in a way that surprised her. "Although, to be honest, I sometimes wonder if your parents enable Miguel too much. I mean, he's 25 and still asking them for money instead of taking responsibility for his own life. Sometimes helping people just makes them more dependent." The observation was astute and aligned with Elena's own growing awareness of family dynamics. But coming from Sophia, who wasn't family and had been a guest at their dinner, it also felt like a criticism that crossed boundaries. "Families are complicated," Elena said diplomatically. Of course," Sophia said quickly. "I didn't mean to judge. I just care about you and hate seeing you stressed about family stuff when you have your own financial challenges to deal with." Elena was beginning to realize that her experiment was revealing not just how people treated her based on their perception of her financial status, but also how they talked about money, family obligations, and success when they thought she shared their struggles. These conversations provided insights into values and attitudes she'd never noticed before, and not all of them were comfortable to acknowledge. That night, Elena lay in bed wondering how much longer she could maintain her deception. The emotional weight of keeping such a significant secret from people she loved was becoming overwhelming. But each day brought new revelations about relationships and family dynamics that felt important to understand before money entered the equation and potentially changed everything forever. She thought about her great-aunt's letter and the wisdom contained in those carefully chosen words. Money did indeed reveal people's true nature, but Elena was learning that it also revealed her own nature in ways she hadn't anticipated. The power to solve other people's problems came with moral complexities she'd never imagined, and the responsibility of wealth extended far beyond managing investments and property. Elena was beginning to understand that her inheritance was not just $50 million, but also the opportunity to learn profound truths about love, loyalty, and the intricate ways that money influences every human relationship. The experiment she'd designed to test others was teaching her about herself, and the lessons were both enlightening and deeply challenging. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Elena knew that soon she would have to decide what to do with everything she was learning.
The question was no longer whether to reveal her inheritance, but how to use both the money and the knowledge she'd gained to build a life aligned with her deepest values and surrounded by relationships that could withstand the ultimate test of truth. 2 months into her secret life as a millionaire pretending to be broke, Elena Martinez discovered that deception was an exhausting art form. Every conversation required careful calculation, every response measured against the persona she was maintaining. The weight of $50 million pressed against her consciousness while she continued her performance as a struggling graphic designer, and the strain was beginning to show in ways she hadn't anticipated. The first crack in her carefully constructed facade appeared during a routine lunch with her coworkers at the marketing firm. Elena sat at their usual table in the cramped break room, mechanically eating a peanut butter sandwich, while her colleagues discussed weekend plans that involved expensive restaurants and shopping trips she supposedly couldn't afford. "You should come with us to that new steakhouse downtown," suggested Marcus, one of the account executives. "They have this amazing wine selection, and I heard the portions are huge." Elena shook her head with what she hoped looked like regretful disappointment. "Thanks, but I'm trying to stick to a budget this month. Maybe next time." The response had become automatic, a reflexive deflection she'd perfected over the weeks. But Jake, who had grown increasingly condescending since perceiving her as financially struggling, leaned back in his chair with an expression that made Elena's stomach tighten. "You know, Elena, I've been thinking about your situation," he said with the tone of someone about to offer unsolicited advice. "Maybe it's time to consider that graphic design isn't a viable long-term career. I mean, if you're constantly broke despite working full-time, the math just doesn't add up." The comment landed like a physical blow. Elena felt her carefully maintained composure waver as anger flared in her chest. Jake was suggesting she abandon the career she genuinely loved based on his assumption about her financial circumstances that were entirely fictional. "I enjoy my work," Elena said, her voice tighter than she intended. "Sure, but enjoyment doesn't pay rent," Jake continued, apparently oblivious to the way his words were affecting her. "Maybe you should look into something more practical. Administrative work, data entry, something with steady hours and better benefits. I know it's not creative, but at your age, you need to think about security." Elena stared at him across the table, realizing that Jake's perception of her supposed poverty had given him permission to dismiss her professional choices and offer condescending career advice. The same work he'd previously respected was now evidence of poor judgment in his mind, simply because he believed she was struggling financially. "I'll take that under consideration," Elena managed, though what she really wanted was to tell Jake exactly what she thought of his unsolicited opinions about her life choices. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, apparently sensing the tension. "Different things work for different people," he said diplomatically.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Elena's always been good at what she does. But Jake wasn't finished. Being good at something isn't enough if it doesn't provide basic financial stability. I'm just saying, from a practical perspective, Elena might want to consider her options before she gets in too deep with debt or ends up having to move back in with her parents. The irony was almost unbearable. Elena was sitting across from a man who made slightly more than her supposed salary, while she secretly controlled assets worth more than Jake would earn in several lifetimes. His condescension was based entirely on false assumptions, yet it revealed something ugly about his character that she'd never noticed before. That evening, Elena sat in her modest apartment, staring at investment statements that showed her wealth growing by thousands of dollars daily, while she'd spent her lunch hour being lectured about financial responsibility by a coworker who had no idea what he was talking about. The disconnect between her reality and her performance was becoming psychologically exhausting. The situation at work was minor compared to what was developing within her family. Elena's experiment in deception was revealing dynamics that made her increasingly uncomfortable, particularly regarding her brother Miguel's relationship with their parents. During a family dinner the following Sunday, Elena observed interactions with new eyes, sharpened by her secret knowledge. Miguel arrived 30 minutes late, offering no apology for keeping everyone waiting. He spent the meal checking his phone and contributing little to conversation beyond complaints about various perceived injustices in his job search. The whole system is rigged against people like us, Miguel declared, while their mother served him a second helping of food he hadn't helped prepare. These employers want experience, but how are you supposed to get experience if nobody will hire you? It's impossible. Elena's father, Carlos, nodded sympathetically. It's harder now than when I was your age. Maybe you should consider construction work. It's good money, and I could get you started with my crew. Miguel wrinkled his nose in distaste. Dad, that's backbreaking labor. I'm not cut out for that kind of work. I need something that uses my brain, not just my muscles. Elena almost laughed at the irony. Miguel had barely finished high school and had never demonstrated particular intellectual curiosity, yet he considered himself above the honest physical labor that had supported their family for decades. His attitude revealed an entitlement that their parents had apparently enabled through years of financial support without corresponding expectations. "What about that delivery job you mentioned last week?" Carmen asked. "Did you follow up with them?" "They wanted me to work weekends," Miguel said dismissively. "I'm not giving up my social life for some minimum wage job. There has to be something better out there." Elena watched her parents' faces as they absorbed their son's casual dismissal of employment opportunities. Instead of challenging his unrealistic expectations, they exchanged worried glances and began discussing which bills they might defer to give Miguel more support money. "Maybe we could help you with gas money for interviews," Rosa offered tentatively. "And you need better clothes for job hunting. That shirt is looking worn." Miguel perked up immediately. "Actually, yeah, I could use some new interview clothes. And my phone is acting up. I probably need a new one if I'm going to be making calls to employers." Elena felt a familiar surge of frustration as she watched her brother manipulate their parents' genuine concern into offers of financial support for increasingly questionable expenses. A new phone was hardly essential for job hunting, but Miguel presented it as a legitimate need while avoiding any actual effort to find employment. "How much would you need?" Carlos asked, despite the fact that Elena knew her parents were already struggling to cover their own basic expenses. "Maybe a few hundred for clothes and the phone," Miguel said with the practiced casualness of someone who had perfected this routine. "I'll pay you back as soon as I find something." Elena had heard variations of this promise countless times over the years, but she'd never seen Miguel repay any of the loans their parents had provided. Yet Carlos and Rosa nodded as if this time would be different, their love for their son blinding them to the pattern they were perpetuating. The conversation moved on to other topics, but Elena found herself studying her family dynamics with uncomfortable new clarity. Her parents' financial struggles weren't just due to low-paying jobs and economic circumstances. They were also the result of consistently prioritizing their children's immediate wants over their own long-term financial stability. Carmen, despite being married with children of her own, still expected their parents to provide emergency financial assistance whenever she and Derek encountered difficulties. Miguel had never been required to develop genuine independence because he could always rely on parental support. Even Elena herself had benefited from this pattern during college, though she'd eventually achieved financial independence. The realization forced Elena to confront uncomfortable questions about her own plan to help her family once she revealed her inheritance. Would providing money actually solve their problems, or would it simply enable existing patterns of dependency and poor decision-making on a larger scale? Her great-aunt's warning about money revealing people's true nature was proving prophetic in ways Elena hadn't anticipated. After dinner, Elena found herself alone in the kitchen with her mother while the others watched television in the living room. Rosa moved slowly as she cleaned dishes, and Elena noticed signs of exhaustion that went beyond the normal tiredness of a long day. "How are you really doing, Mama?" Elena asked gently. "You look tired." Rosa paused in her dishwashing, her shoulders sagging slightly. "It's been a hard few months, mija. Your father's back problems are getting worse, and the doctor wants him to consider switching to lighter work. But at his age, with his experience all in construction, what else can he do?" Elena's heart ached for her parents' very real struggles. Unlike Miguel's manufactured crises or Carmen's poor financial choices, her parents were facing legitimate challenges that threatened their ability to maintain even their modest lifestyle. "And then there's Miguel," Rosa continued with a sigh. "I know he needs our support, but sometimes I wonder if we're helping him or hurting him.
He's a grown man, but he acts like he's still a teenager, expecting us to solve all his problems. The admission surprised Elena. She'd never heard her mother express doubt about their enabling of Miguel's dependency. Perhaps Rosa was more aware of the family dynamics than Elena had realized. "What do you think you should do differently?" Elena asked carefully. Rosa was quiet for a long moment, her hands still in the soapy water. "I don't know. It's so hard to watch your child struggle, even when you suspect they're not trying as hard as they could. But your father and I won't be able to support Miguel forever. We're not getting any younger, and we need to start thinking about our own retirement, not that we have much saved." Elena felt the weight of her secret pressing against her chest. Her parents were sacrificing their own financial security to support children who didn't truly need the help, while she sat on enough money to ensure their comfort for the rest of their lives. The injustice of the situation was overwhelming. "Maybe it would help Miguel if you stopped giving him money," Elena suggested gently.
Sometimes people don't grow until they have to. Rosa nodded slowly. You might be right. It's just so hard to say no when he asks. He makes it sound so desperate, so necessary. And he's still our baby, even though he's 25. Elena understood her mother's dilemma, but she also saw how misplaced compassion was harming everyone involved. Miguel wasn't learning to be independent because he didn't have to. Her parents weren't building retirement security because they were constantly diverting money to their adult son. The cycle continued because no one was willing to disrupt it. The conversation was interrupted when Carmen appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression troubled. "Elena, can I talk to you about something privately?" Elena followed her sister to the small back porch, where Carmen immediately launched into what sounded like a prepared speech. "I know I don't have any right to ask this, especially with your own financial situation, but I'm getting desperate. Derek still hasn't found steady work, and we're behind on everything again. The car payment, utilities, credit cards. I feel like we're drowning." Elena had suspected this conversation was coming. Carmen's financial crises followed predictable patterns, and it had been several weeks since the anonymous payment Elena had made to their landlord. The temporary relief had apparently been consumed by other expenses. "What exactly are you asking me?" Elena said, though she suspected she already knew. Carmen took a deep breath. "I wondered if you could co-sign a loan for us. I know your credit is better than ours, and we wouldn't qualify on our own. It would just be to consolidate our debts and give us a fresh start. We'd make all the payments, of course." Elena stared at her sister in disbelief. Carmen was asking her to take on legal responsibility for debts while believing Elena was barely managing her own expenses. The request revealed a level of selfishness that Elena found staggering. "Carmen, you think I'm struggling financially, but you want me to co-sign a loan that could ruin my credit if you can't pay it back?" Carmen's expression became defensive. "We would pay it back. This is just temporary until Derek finds something steady. And honestly, Elena, you're single with no kids. You don't understand the pressure Derek and I are under. We have responsibilities you don't have." The comment was like a slap. Carmen was simultaneously asking for Elena's help while dismissing Elena's own challenges and implying that her life was somehow less important because she didn't have children. Elena felt anger building in her chest, fueled not just by Carmen's current request, but by months of observing her sister's attitude toward money and family obligations. "My answer is no," Elena said firmly. "I won't co-sign a loan for you and Derek." Carmen's face flushed with indignation. "I can't believe you're being so selfish. We're family, Elena. Family is supposed to help each other." "Family is supposed to help each other," Elena agreed, "but that doesn't mean enabling poor decisions or taking on financial responsibility for other adults' choices." "Poor decisions?" Carmen's voice rose dangerously. "You think having children and trying to provide for them is a poor decision? You think Derek losing his job is somehow our fault?" Elena took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "I think consistently spending more money than you earn is a poor decision. I think asking other people to co-sign loans to cover your overspending is a poor decision. And I think attacking me for not agreeing to take on legal responsibility for your debts is a poor decision." Carmen stared at her sister as if she'd never seen her before. "You've changed, Elena. You used to care about family. Now you're just cold and selfish." The accusation stung because Elena knew that in some ways it was true. Her deception had created distance between her and her family members, and her secret knowledge had made her more judgmental about their financial choices. But she also recognized that Carmen's definition of caring about family seemed to involve automatic compliance with financial requests, regardless of the consequences. "I do care about family," said quietly, "but I also care about enabling destructive patterns. Maybe instead of looking for loans and cosigners, you and Derek should consider making some difficult changes to your lifestyle." Carmen's expression hardened. "That's easy for you to say. You don't have mouths to feed or a mortgage to pay. You have no idea what real responsibility looks like." Elena almost laughed at the irony. She was currently responsible for managing more money than Carmen could imagine, making investment decisions that affected her financial future far more significantly than Carmen's credit card payments. But Carmen saw Elena's single status and modest lifestyle as evidence of lesser responsibility rather than different choices. "I think this conversation is over," Elena said, opening the door to go back inside. "Fine," Carmen snapped, "but don't come crying to me when you need help someday. Remember this moment when you're old and alone and need your family." Elena paused in the doorway, struck by the cruelty of Carmen's parting shot. Her sister was essentially threatening to withdraw family support in retaliation for Elena's refusal to co-sign a loan. It was emotional manipulation designed to create guilt and compliance, and it revealed an ugly side of Carmen's character that Elena had never fully recognized. The drive home was torture. Elena found herself questioning every aspect of her experiment and wondering if she was learning things about her family that she would have been happier not knowing. Carmen's request had forced her to confront the possibility that some family members saw her primarily as a potential financial resource rather than as a person deserving of consideration and respect. The pattern was becoming clearer with each interaction. Miguel expected financial support from their parents without offering anything meaningful in return. Carmen viewed family relationships as sources of emergency funding and became hostile when those sources declined to provide assistance. Even their parents, whom Elena loved deeply, had developed habits of financial enabling that suggested they struggled to distinguish between helping and harming their adult children. Elena's best friend Sophia provided another troubling example when she called later that week with what initially sounded like a social invitation.
"I was wondering if you wanted to go shopping this weekend," Sophia said brightly. "There's a sale at that outlet mall, and I thought it might be fun to check it out together." Elena agreed, thinking it would be nice to spend time with her friend doing something unrelated to her secret or her family's financial dramas. But the shopping trip quickly revealed ulterior motives that left Elena feeling manipulated and disappointed. Sophia's idea of shopping involved visiting expensive stores where she tried on clothes, shoes, and accessories while making increasingly obvious hints about her inability to afford the items she obviously coveted. "This dress is gorgeous," she would say, holding it up to herself in front of a mirror. "Too bad it costs a week's worth of grocery money." Elena initially responded with sympathetic murmurs, but Sophia's hints became more pointed as the afternoon progressed. "I really need new work clothes," Sophia said while examining a blazer that cost more than Elena supposedly earned in several days. "But on a teacher's salary, shopping for professional wear is basically impossible." The comments were clearly designed to elicit offers of financial assistance, but Elena maintained her role as someone who couldn't afford to help with such expenses. Sophia's disappointment became increasingly evident as Elena failed to offer to purchase items or suggest splitting costs. The dynamic reached an uncomfortable climax when Sophia spotted a purse that she declared absolutely perfect for her needs. "This is exactly what I've been looking for," she said, examining it with obvious longing. "It's professional enough for work, but stylish enough for evenings out. And look, it's marked down from $300 to $200. That's practically stealing." Elena waited to see if Sophia would purchase the purse herself, but her friend continued to hold it while making comments about how rarely she found accessories that were both appropriate for her profession and within reasonable price range. Finally, Sophia turned to Elena with an expression of hopeful expectation. You know, Elena, I've been thinking about our friendship and how you never let me treat you to things because you're always worried about money. What if I got this purse and we considered it an early birthday present for me from you? You could pay me back when your finances improve, or we could call it even for all the times I've bought coffee or covered small expenses. Elena stared at her friend in amazement. Sophia was asking her to purchase a $200 purse while believing Elena was financially struggling and framing the request as somehow beneficial to Elena herself. The manipulation was so blatant that Elena wondered how she'd never noticed Sophia's calculating nature before. I can't afford a $200 purse, Elena said simply. Sophia's expression shifted through disappointment, frustration, and finally what looked like anger. Of course you can't, she said with barely concealed irritation. I just thought maybe, as friends, we could figure something out, but I guess that's too much to ask. The remainder of their shopping trip was tense and awkward. Sophia's mood had soured completely, and she made several pointed comments about people who were unwilling to stretch themselves to help friends in need. Elena began to understand that Sophia's perception of their friendship included an expectation of financial reciprocity that Elena had apparently been failing to meet. The revelation was particularly painful because Elena genuinely cared about Sophia and would have been happy to buy the purse if she believed the request came from authentic friendship rather than calculated manipulation. But Sophia's approach had been so clearly designed to make Elena feel guilty for not spending money she supposedly didn't have that the gesture would have felt like capitulation to emotional blackmail. That evening, Elena sat in her apartment reviewing the events of the past few months with growing clarity about the patterns she'd uncovered. Her experiment in financial deception had revealed that many of her closest relationships contained elements of expectation, manipulation, and conditional affection that she'd never recognized before. Miguel expected financial support from their parents without offering genuine effort toward independence. Carmen became hostile when family members declined to enable her poor financial decisions. Sophia attempted to manipulate Elena into purchases through guilt and emotional pressure. Even Elena's coworkers treated her differently based on their perception of her economic status. The discoveries were painful, but also liberating in a strange way. Elena was learning to distinguish between people who cared about her as a person and those who saw her primarily as a potential source of benefit. The knowledge was creating emotional distance from relationships that had apparently been less authentic than she'd believed, but it was also helping her identify the people whose affection was genuine and unconditional. Her parents, despite their enabling of Miguel, had consistently shown concern for Elena's well-being without expecting anything in return. Mia, her roommate, had become more generous and supportive as Elena's supposed financial struggles had continued. Several coworkers had quietly offered help or covered small expenses without making Elena feel indebted or guilty. Elena was beginning to understand that her great-aunt's gift had been more than money. The inheritance had provided an opportunity to see her relationships clearly, to understand the difference between genuine affection and calculated interest, and to make informed decisions about whom to trust with both her secrets and her future. But the emotional cost of maintaining her deception was becoming overwhelming. Every conversation required careful performance, every interaction with family and friends was filtered through the lens of her experiment. Elena was learning valuable lessons about human nature and relationships, but the knowledge was coming at the price of her own authenticity and peace of mind. The breaking point came during a family gathering for Carmen's daughter's birthday party. Elena arrived at Carmen's house carrying a modest gift, maintaining her performance as someone who couldn't afford anything elaborate. The party was small, attended mostly by family members who were all struggling with various financial challenges. Elena watched her young niece open presents with the uninhibited joy of a child who didn't yet understand the economic constraints that limited her parents' ability to provide. The gifts were thoughtful but inexpensive, chosen with careful consideration of tight budgets and competing priorities. During the party, Elena overheard a conversation between Carmen and their Aunt Patricia that revealed the full extent of Carmen's resentment toward Elena's recent refusal to co-sign the loan. "She's become so selfish lately," Carmen was saying, in a voice barely low enough to avoid being overheard. Patricia, who had always been something of a gossip, responded with eager interest.
What happened? I asked for a simple favor, just to co-sign a small loan so Derek and I could consolidate some debts. Nothing that would cost her anything unless we defaulted, which we obviously wouldn't. But she refused without even considering it. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks as she listened to Carmen's distorted version of their conversation. Her sister was presenting the loan request as a minor favor, while omitting the significant legal and financial risks involved for Elena. That doesn't sound like Elena, Patricia said, though her tone suggested she was enjoying the drama. She's always been the responsible one. Exactly, Carmen continued, which is why this is so strange. It's like she doesn't care about family anymore. And meanwhile, Mom and Dad are still supporting Miguel, and I'm drowning in debt with 2 kids to feed. But Elena can't be bothered to help because it might inconvenience her somehow. Elena realized she was listening to Carmen actively damage her reputation within their extended family, spreading a narrative that painted Elena as selfish and uncaring. The unfairness of the situation was staggering. Carmen was criticizing Elena for failing to take on legal responsibility for debts while believing Elena was barely managing her own expenses, and presenting this as evidence of Elena's character defects rather than reasonable financial boundaries. The conversation continued with Patricia offering her own theories about Elena's supposed selfishness and changed attitude. Elena found herself characterized as someone who had forgotten her family obligations and become too focused on her own interests. The gossip was particularly painful because Elena knew she was being criticized for maintaining healthy boundaries while sitting on the resources to solve everyone's problems instantly. Elena spent the remainder of the party in a fog of anger and hurt, watching her family interact while knowing that at least some of them were discussing her perceived failures as a family member. The irony was almost unbearable. She was being portrayed as selfish and uncaring by people who saw her primarily as a potential source of financial assistance. That evening, Elena made a decision that had been building for weeks. Her experiment had taught her everything she needed to know about her relationships and the role money played in them. Continuing the deception was serving no useful purpose and was causing her significant emotional distress. It was time to reveal the truth about her inheritance and deal with whatever consequences followed. But first, Elena wanted to make one final test. She decided to tell selected people about a fictional financial crisis to see who would offer genuine support versus who would distance themselves from her problems.
It would be the ultimate measure of who truly cared about her well-being versus who valued her only when she wasn't a burden. Elena crafted a story about unexpected medical bills from a minor surgery that had resulted in complications requiring additional treatment. She would claim that her insurance had denied coverage for some procedures, leaving her with several $1,000s in debt that she couldn't manage on her current salary. The fictional crisis would be serious enough to require significant support, but not so dramatic as to seem implausible. She started with Sophia, calling her friend with carefully rehearsed distress about her supposed medical and financial emergency. Sophia's response would set the baseline for Elena's expectations about how others might react. "Oh no," Sophia said when Elena finished explaining her fictional situation. "That's terrible. I can't believe insurance companies can just deny coverage like that. What are you going to do?" Elena paused, giving Sophia an opportunity to offer assistance or support. "I don't know," Elena said with manufactured desperation. "I'm looking into payment plans with the hospital, but the interest rates are outrageous. I might have to consider a second job or moving back in with my parents." Sophia made sympathetic noises but offered no concrete assistance. "That's such a difficult situation," she said. "I wish I could help, but you know how tight things are on a teacher's salary. Maybe you could start a fundraising page online. I've seen people do that for medical expenses." The suggestion that Elena should essentially beg strangers for money while Sophia offered no help of her own revealed the limits of their friendship clearly. Sophia was willing to express sympathy and offer advice that cost her nothing, but she wasn't prepared to provide actual support during what she believed was a genuine crisis. Elena's mother responded very differently when presented with the same fictional emergency. Despite her own financial struggles, Rosa immediately began problem-solving and offering concrete assistance. "Mija, don't worry about this alone," Rosa said firmly. "Your father and I will figure something out. We can't cover everything, but we'll help as much as we possibly can."
And I'll call your Aunt Maria to see if she knows anyone who works with medical billing. Sometimes they can negotiate better payment terms. The contrast between Sophia's response and her mother's was stark. Rosa had offered help despite her own limited resources, while Sophia had essentially suggested that Elena solve her problems through internet charity. Elena felt a mixture of guilt about deceiving her mother and gratitude for Rosa's immediate willingness to sacrifice for her daughter's well-being. Miguel's response to Elena's fictional crisis provided another revealing data point. When Elena called him with her fabricated story, his reaction was notably self-centered. "Wow, that really sucks," he said, with what sounded like genuine sympathy. "Medical bills are the worst because you can't really plan for them. I guess this means you won't be able to help mom and dad with anything for a while, right? They've been hinting about needing money for car repairs, but I'm still looking for work, so I can't contribute anything." Elena realized that Miguel was primarily concerned about her fictional financial crisis might affect her ability to support their parents, thereby increasing pressure on him to contribute. He wasn't offering help or expressing concern about Elena's well-being, but rather calculating how her problems might create inconvenience for him. Carmen's response was perhaps the most disappointing of all. When Elena shared her fictional medical and financial emergency, Carmen's first reaction was anger rather than sympathy. "Are you kidding me right now?" Carmen snapped. "You refused to co-sign a loan for Derek and me because you claimed you couldn't take on additional financial risk, but now you want sympathy because you have your own money problems? That's pretty hypocritical, don't you think?" Elena was stunned by her sister's response. Carmen was essentially arguing that Elena's refusal to enable Carmen's poor financial decisions somehow invalidated Elena's right to expect support during a medical crisis. The reaction revealed a level of vindictiveness and lack of empathy that Elena found shocking. "Carmen, this is a medical emergency," Elena said carefully. "I didn't choose to have health problems." "And Derek didn't choose to lose his job," Carmen shot back. "But when we needed help, you were too worried about your precious credit score to show any family loyalty. Now you want understanding and support for your problems? That's not how it works, Elena." Elena ended the call feeling sick to her stomach. Her sister had essentially told her that Elena didn't deserve support during a medical crisis because she'd refused to co-sign a loan for Carmen's debt consolidation. It was a level of cruelty that Elena would never have expected from someone she'd loved and trusted her entire life. The responses to her fictional crisis revealed the same patterns Elena had been observing for months, but in starker relief. Some people offered genuine support despite their own limitations, while others either offered nothing or actually became hostile when presented with Elena's supposed needs. The final test had confirmed everything Elena had learned about her relationships during her months of deception. Elena spent that night lying awake in her bed, processing the full scope of what her experiment had revealed about the people in her life. The knowledge was painful, but also clarifying. She now understood which relationships were based on genuine affection and which were transactional in nature. She knew who could be trusted with her secrets and her vulnerability, and who saw her primarily as a source of potential benefit. Tomorrow, Elena decided, she would begin the process of revealing the truth about her inheritance. But she would do so selectively, sharing the information first with people who had demonstrated authentic care for her well-being and maintaining her secret from those who had revealed themselves to be primarily interested in what she could do for them. The $50 million her great-aunt had left her was indeed a gift, but not just because of the financial security it provided. The inheritance had also given Elena the opportunity to see her relationships clearly, to understand the difference between genuine love and conditional affection, and to make informed decisions about whom to trust with the most important aspects of her life. Elena's experiment was coming to an end, but the lessons she'd learned would shape her future in ways that were far more valuable than money. She was finally ready to step out from behind the mask she'd been wearing and face the consequences of both her deception and her newfound clarity about the people who surrounded her. Elena Martinez woke up on a Thursday morning 3 months after learning about her inheritance and made the decision that would change everything. She was done living a lie. The emotional exhaustion of maintaining her deception had reached a breaking point, and the knowledge she'd gained about her relationships, while painful, was complete. It was time to reveal the truth about her $50 million inheritance and face whatever consequences followed.
She began by calling in sick to work, something she rarely did, but she needed the day to prepare for conversations that would reshape her life. Elena sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad, making notes about how and when to reveal her secret to different people. The list was shorter than she'd expected, reflecting her new understanding of who deserved her trust and honesty. Her first call was to Margaret Chen, her financial advisor, to discuss the practical aspects of transitioning from secret wealth to acknowledged inheritance. Margaret listened carefully as Elena explained her decision to end the deception and begin living more openly as a wealthy woman. "I think you've made a wise choice," Margaret said. "Maintaining that level of secrecy indefinitely would have been psychologically unsustainable. Have you decided how much you want to share with your family about the extent of your inheritance?" Elena had been wrestling with this question for days. "I think I'll start by telling them I inherited some money from my great-aunt, but I won't specify amounts initially. I want to see how they react to the basic information before deciding whether to share more details." Margaret agreed, but a gradual approach made sense. "You might also want to consider establishing some boundaries around financial requests before you tell anyone. Inheritance money can bring out behaviors in people that surprise even close family members." Elena had already been thinking about boundaries, informed by months of observing how her family members approached financial relationships.
She decided to establish clear policies about loans, gifts, and ongoing support before anyone knew she had the resources to provide them. Her first revelation would be to Mia, her roommate, who had consistently shown genuine kindness and support during Elena's supposed financial struggles. Elena waited until that evening when they were both home, sitting in their small living room watching television. "Mia, I need to tell you something important, and I owe you an apology," Elena began. Mia muted the television and turned to face her with immediate concern. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Elena took a deep breath. "Do you remember my great-aunt Vivian, the one who died a few months ago? The one whose funeral you went to in Sacramento? Yeah, you said you barely knew her." "That was true, but what I didn't tell you was that she left me an inheritance, a substantial inheritance." Mia's eyebrows rose. "Oh wow, that's wonderful. Wait, is that why you've been so weird about money lately? I thought you were going through a really tough time financially." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I've been pretending to struggle with money because I wanted to understand how people in my life related to me when they thought I needed help versus when they might want something from me." Mia stared at her for a long moment, processing this information. "So, when I've been buying extra groceries and offering to cover utilities, you've actually been rich this whole time?" "Yes, and I'm sorry. I feel terrible about deceiving you, especially because you've been so generous and kind. You've shown me what genuine friendship looks like." Elena braced herself for anger or hurt feelings, but Mia surprised her by starting to laugh. "You've been conducting a psychological experiment on everyone in your life? That's simultaneously brilliant and completely crazy. You're not angry?" Mia considered this seriously. "I'm a little hurt that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth from the beginning, but honestly, I'm mostly impressed that you had the self-control to keep pretending to be broke while people treated you badly. What did you learn?" Elena felt a wave of relief at Mia's understanding response. "I learned that some people I thought cared about me really just saw me as a potential resource. And I learned that some people, like you, are genuinely good friends regardless of what I can offer them." "Well, that's kind of flattering," Mia said with a grin. "So just how substantial is this inheritance we're talking about?" Elena hesitated, then decided Mia had earned complete honesty. $52 million. Mia's jaw dropped. "Holy shit, Elena. You're not just rich, you're wealthy. Like, never work again wealthy." "I know. It's still surreal to me." Mia was quiet for a moment, then looked around their modest apartment. "Are you going to move out? I mean, I assume you'll want something a lot nicer than this place." Elena realized she hadn't fully considered this question. "I don't know yet. I've been so focused on the deception that I haven't really planned what comes next. What would you think if I stayed here for a while longer?" "Honestly, it would be kind of weird knowing my roommate is worth $50 million while we're splitting the cost of generic cereal," Mia said with characteristic directness. "But also, I'd hate to lose you as a roommate because you're the best one I've ever had, rich or poor." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. This was exactly the kind of authentic response she'd hoped for from the people who truly cared about her. Mia was being honest about the awkwardness of the situation while also expressing genuine affection that wasn't dependent on Elena's financial status. Maybe we could figure out a different arrangement, Elena suggested. I could get a bigger place and you could live there too, if you wanted, as friends, not as roommates splitting expenses. Mia's eyes lit up. Are you offering to be my sugar mama? Elena laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. I'm offering to share my ridiculous good fortune with someone who's been a real friend to me. They spent the evening talking about Elena's experiences over the past few months, with Mia asking insightful questions about what Elena had learned and expressing amazement at some of the behaviors Elena described. Mia's response gave Elena hope that revealing the truth might actually strengthen the relationships worth preserving. The next person Elena told was her mother, though she decided to start with a limited version of the truth. She drove to her parents' house on Saturday morning, finding Rosa alone in the kitchen while Carlos worked in the garage on a neighbor's car to earn extra money. "Mama, I need to talk to you about something," Elena said, settling into a familiar chair at the kitchen table where she'd done homework as a child. Rosa immediately looked concerned. "Is this about those medical bills you mentioned? Your father and I have been trying to figure out how much we can help you with." Elena felt a stab of guilt remembering her fictional medical crisis. "Actually, that's part of what I need to tell you. I haven't been completely honest about my financial situation." Rosa's expression shifted to confusion. "What do you mean? Do you remember Great Aunt Vivian, your father's sister who died a few months ago?" "Of course. We went to her funeral. You said you were driving down to Sacramento to handle some paperwork related to her estate." Elena took a deep breath. "She left me an inheritance, Mama. Enough that I don't need to worry about money anymore." Rosa stared at her daughter, trying to process this information. "How much money are we talking about?" "Enough that I could pay off your mortgage and Dad's medical bills and still have plenty left over."
Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "Mija, why didn't you tell us? We've been so worried about you, trying to figure out how to help with your expenses when we can barely cover our own." "I'm sorry, Mama. I wanted to understand how people treated me when they thought I needed help versus when they might want something from me." Rosa was quiet for a long moment, and Elena worried that her mother might be angry about the deception. But when Rosa finally spoke, her words surprised Elena. "Your great-aunt was a smart woman," Rosa said slowly. "I remember her being very careful about people's motivations, especially when it came to money. She probably warned you about that in her letter, didn't she?" Elena nodded, amazed by her mother's intuitive understanding. "And what did you learn from your experiment?" Rosa asked. Elena considered how much to share about her discoveries regarding Carmen and Miguel. "I learned that some people care more about what I can provide than who I am as a person. But I also learned that you and Dad genuinely love me regardless of my circumstances." Rosa reached across the table to squeeze Elena's hand. "Of course we do, Mija. You're our daughter. Money doesn't change that." "It changes things for some people," Elena said carefully. Rosa sighed deeply. "Are you talking about Carmen and Miguel?" Elena was surprised by her mother's directness. "What makes you ask that?" "I'm not blind, Elena. I see how Carmen approaches money problems and how Miguel expects solutions without effort. I've been worried about what would happen when your father and I are gone, and they still haven't learned to handle their own responsibilities." Elena felt a mix of relief and sadness at her mother's awareness of the family dynamics. "What do you think I should do?" Rosa considered the question seriously. "I think you should be very careful about how much you help them, at least initially. Money can reveal the worst in people, even people you love." Elena felt validated in her cautious approach. Her mother's wisdom about family dynamics aligned with what Elena had observed during her months of deception. "There's something else I need to tell you," Elena said. "That medical emergency I called about last week, it was fictional. I wanted to see how people would respond when they thought I needed help." Rosa looked hurt for a moment, then understanding crossed her face. "You were testing us." "I'm sorry. I know it was manipulative, but I needed to know who I could count on when things were difficult." "And what did you learn?" "I learned that you and Dad immediately offered help despite your own struggles. Carmen was angry that I had problems after refusing to co-sign her loan. Miguel was mainly concerned about how my crisis might affect his access to financial support from you and Dad." Rosa nodded sadly. "That sounds about right. Your father and I have made mistakes with Carmen and Miguel, enabling them instead of teaching them independence.
We thought we were showing love, but maybe we were preventing growth. Elena spent the next hour talking with her mother about family dynamics, inheritance planning, and the challenges that would come with revealing her wealth to other family members. Rosa's responses continued to impress Elena with their wisdom and emotional maturity. When Carlos returned from the garage, Rosa filled him in on Elena's revelation. His response was characteristically practical and loving. "That's wonderful news, mija," he said, embracing Elena warmly. "But I hope you'll be careful about who you tell and how quickly you help people. Sometimes, getting everything you want isn't good for a person's character." Elena felt grateful for her parents' measured responses and their intuitive understanding of the challenges that came with sudden wealth. "I'd like to pay off your mortgage and Dad's medical bills," Elena said. "Would you let me do that?" Her parents exchanged a long look, communicating in the wordless way of couples who had been married for decades. "That would mean a lot to us," Carlos said finally, "but we want you to think carefully about helping Carmen and Miguel. They need to learn lessons that money can't teach." Elena agreed, feeling more confident in her approach, knowing that her parents understood the complexity of the situation. The next revelation was to Jason, Bobby's brother from the original story. But in Elena's version, this was David Martinez, a cousin she'd reconnected with recently who had shown genuine interest in her life without any expectation of benefit. David's response was enthusiastic, immediately offering advice about managing family expectations and maintaining privacy. Elena's conversation with Sophia, however, went very differently. She met her childhood friend for coffee at their usual place, choosing a public setting in case the conversation became uncomfortable. "Sophia, I need to tell you something that's going to change our friendship," Elena began. Sophia's eyes lit up with interest. "That sounds dramatic. What's going on?" "Remember my great-aunt who died a few months ago? She left me a substantial inheritance." Sophia's expression shifted immediately to excitement, mixed with something that looked like calculation. "Oh my God, Elena, how much are we talking about? Enough to buy a house? A new car?" Elena had prepared for this reaction. "Enough that I don't need to worry about money anymore." "That's amazing. I'm so happy for you. This explains why you've been acting so strange about money lately. You were probably just figuring out how to handle everything." Elena decided not to correct Sophia's assumption about her recent behavior.
It's been an adjustment. Sophia leaned forward eagerly. "So, what are your plans? Are you going to quit your job, travel, buy property? Oh, and that purse I wanted the other day. Now you can definitely afford it. We should go back to that store." The immediate pivot to Sophia's personal desires confirmed everything Elena had suspected about their friendship. Sophia's first thought wasn't about Elena's well-being or the challenges of managing inherited wealth, but about how Elena's fortune might benefit Sophia herself. "I'm still figuring out my plans," Elena said carefully. "Well, when you do figure things out, I hope you'll remember your oldest friend," Sophia said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I mean, teachers don't make much money, and it would be nice to finally be able to afford some of the things I've always wanted." Elena felt a familiar disappointment settle in her chest. Even now, with the truth revealed, Sophia was primarily focused on what Elena's wealth could do for her personally, rather than expressing genuine happiness for her friend's good fortune. "I'm still figuring out my plans," Elena said carefully. "Well, when you do figure things out, I hope you'll remember your oldest friend," Sophia said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I mean, teachers don't make much money, and it would be nice to finally be able to afford some of the things I've always wanted." Elena felt a familiar disappointment settle in her chest. Even now, with the truth revealed, Sophia was primarily focused on what Elena's wealth could do for her personally, rather than expressing genuine happiness for her friend's good fortune. "I'm going to be very careful about how I handle the inheritance," Elena said. "My great-aunt warned me that money can complicate relationships." Sophia's expression tightened slightly. "I hope you don't become one of those people who gets paranoid about their friends once they have money. That would be really sad." The comment was clearly designed to make Elena feel guilty for being cautious about financial relationships, but Elena had learned to recognize such manipulation tactics. "I hope I don't lose friends who can't be happy for my success without expecting to benefit from it," Elena replied evenly.
Sophia's face flushed, apparently recognizing the implicit criticism. "I guess we'll see how much your new money changes you," she said coolly. Elena left the coffee shop knowing that her friendship with Sophia was essentially over. The inheritance hadn't changed Elena, but it had revealed that Sophia's affection was conditional on what Elena could provide, rather than on genuine mutual care and respect. The most difficult conversation was with Carmen, whom Elena called to arrange a private meeting. Carmen agreed to meet at Elena's apartment, though she arrived with an attitude that suggested she was still angry about Elena's refusal to co-sign a loan and her perceived selfishness during Carmen's recent crisis. "So, what's this about?" Carmen asked without preamble, declining Elena's offer of coffee and remaining standing in the living room. "I need to tell you something important about my financial situation," Elena began. Carmen crossed her arms defensively. "Let me guess, you're doing better than you pretended, and you feel guilty about not helping family when we needed it." Elena was struck by how close to the truth Carmen's sarcastic guess actually was. "Great Aunt Vivian left me an inheritance." Carmen's expression shifted from defensive anger to sharp interest. "How much?" "Enough that I can afford to help family members who are genuinely trying to improve their situations." Carmen's eyes lit up with immediate calculations. "This is perfect timing. Derek and I are still struggling with those debts, and now that you actually have money, you can help us properly, instead of making excuses." Elena had anticipated this response. "I'm willing to help, but with conditions." "Conditions?" Carmen's voice rose dangerously. "We're family, Elena. You don't put conditions on helping family." "I do when the help is designed to enable better choices, rather than just solve immediate problems." Elena had prepared a proposal after consulting with Margaret Chen about responsible ways to help family members. "I'll pay off your current debts completely, but Derek has to be employed full-time for at least 6 months before I'll consider any additional assistance. And you both have to complete a financial planning course and stick to a budget that prevents you from accumulating new debt." Carmen stared at her sister in disbelief. "You're treating us like children. We don't need lectures about money management from someone who just got lucky with an inheritance." "I'm treating you like adults who need to learn to manage money responsibly," Elena corrected. "The inheritance didn't make me financially literate overnight. I've been working with professionals to understand how to handle wealth responsibly." Carmen's expression hardened. "So now you think you're better than us because you have money?" "I think I want to help in ways that actually solve problems instead of just postponing them." Carmen was quiet for a moment, and Elena hoped her sister might be considering the reasonableness of the proposal. But when Carmen spoke again, her words revealed the depth of her entitlement and resentment. "You know what? Keep your money and your conditions. Derek and I will figure things out ourselves, like we always have. But don't expect me to pretend everything is normal between us when you're sitting on millions while your own sister struggles." Elena was shocked that Carmen had guessed the approximate magnitude of the inheritance. "How did you know it was millions?" Carmen's laugh was bitter. "Because anything less and you would have just said the amount instead of being all mysterious about it. Plus, you're talking about paying off all our debts like it's nothing. That means you have serious money." Elena realized her sister was more perceptive than she'd given her credit for, though Carmen was using that perception to fuel resentment rather than understanding. "The money comes with responsibilities," Elena said. "I can't just throw cash at problems without considering whether it actually helps people in the long run." "That's convenient," Carmen snapped. "You can justify being stingy by claiming it's for our own good. How noble of you." Elena felt her patience eroding. "Carmen, I'm offering to completely eliminate your debt. That's not being stingy. With conditions that treat Derek and I like irresponsible children instead of adults facing legitimate financial challenges." Elena recognized that this conversation was following the same pattern as their previous disagreement about co-signing the loan. Carmen wanted financial assistance without accountability or changed behavior, and she became hostile when offered help that included expectations of growth or responsibility. "My offer stands," Elena said firmly. "If you and Derek want to accept help with conditions designed to prevent future financial crises, I'm happy to provide it. If you prefer to handle things independently, I respect that choice too."
Carmen gathered her purse and headed toward the door. Don't hold your breath waiting for us to come begging for your conditional charity.
Some of us have too much pride to accept help that comes with lectures and judgment. Elena watched her sister leave, feeling sad but not surprised by the outcome. Carmen's response had confirmed everything Elena had learned about her sister's attitude toward money, family obligations, and personal responsibility. Miguel's reaction was different but equally revealing. When Elena called to tell him about the inheritance, his first response was excitement, followed immediately by elaborate plans for how Elena should spend her money on family members. "This is incredible," Miguel said. "Finally, someone in our family caught a break. So when are you going to buy Mom and Dad a new house? And I was thinking, with money like that, you could probably set me up with a really nice apartment and maybe help me start a business instead of working for other people." Elena listened to Miguel's enthusiastic assumptions about how she would distribute her wealth, noting that all of his suggestions involved Elena solving other people's problems rather than encouraging those people to solve their own problems. "I'm planning to help Mom and Dad with their immediate needs," Elena said. "As for other family members, I want to see people making genuine efforts to improve their own situations before I provide assistance." Miguel's enthusiasm cooled noticeably. "What do you mean by genuine efforts? I've been looking for work." "Have you been looking for any work or just for the perfect job that meets all your preferences?" Miguel was quiet for a moment. "I'm not going to take just anything. I have standards." "Having standards is fine, but having income is also important for a 25-year-old adult man." Elena could practically hear Miguel's irritation through the phone. "Are you saying you won't help me unless I take some minimum wage job that's beneath my potential?" "I'm saying I'll help people who are actively working to improve their situations, not people who are waiting for perfect opportunities while depending on family support." Miguel's response was predictably self-pitying. "I can't believe you're going to lord this money over family members and judge whether we're worthy of help. That's really cold, Elena." Elena had prepared for this type of guilt-inducing response. "I'm not lording anything over anyone. I'm trying to help in ways that encourage growth and independence rather than dependency." "Whatever," Miguel said dismissively. "I guess we'll see whether having money turns you into one of those rich people who forgets where they came from." Elena ended the call feeling drained but vindicated in her cautious approach to family financial assistance. Miguel's response had revealed that he saw her inheritance primarily as a solution to his own reluctance to accept adult responsibilities, rather than as Elena's good fortune that she had the right to manage according to her own values and judgment. The pattern of responses to Elena's revelation was remarkably consistent. People who had shown genuine care and support during her supposed financial struggles were happy for her success and supportive of her cautious approach to managing wealth. People who had seen her primarily as a potential resource became resentful when offered help that included expectations of responsibility and growth. Elena spent the following weeks adjusting to life as an acknowledged wealthy person rather than a secret millionaire pretending to be broke. The transition was both liberating and challenging in ways she hadn't anticipated. The liberation came from no longer having to carefully manage every word and action to maintain her deception. Elena could acknowledge her financial security, make purchases that reflected her actual resources, and plan for a future that included the freedom to pursue interests and causes that mattered to her, rather than just earning survival money. But the challenges were significant too. Elena discovered that being known as a wealthy person changed how strangers interacted with her, how service providers quoted prices, and how casual acquaintances approached social situations. She began to understand why her great-aunt had been so private about her financial circumstances. Elena also had to navigate the ongoing family dynamics that her revelation had created. Her parents were grateful for the assistance she provided with their mortgage and medical bills, but they were also worried about how her wealth might affect family relationships long-term. Their concerns proved well-founded as Carmen continued to maintain distance from Elena, and Miguel became increasingly resentful about Elena's expectations regarding employment and independence.
The most positive change was Elena's ability to pursue meaningful work and charitable causes. She left her job at the marketing firm and began volunteering with organizations that helped people develop financial literacy and independence. The work felt aligned with her values and allowed her to use her experience and resources in ways that made a genuine difference. Elena also began dating someone she met through her volunteer work, a man named Daniel who knew about her wealth from the beginning but was attracted to her character and values rather than her bank account. The relationship felt authentic in ways that her friendship with Sophia never had, built on mutual respect and shared interests rather than on what each person could provide for the other. 6 months after revealing her inheritance, Elena reflected on the journey that had begun with her great-aunt's unexpected gift. The $50 million had indeed changed her life, but not in the ways she might have originally expected. The money had provided financial security and freedom, but more importantly, it had taught her profound lessons about relationships, family dynamics, and her own values and boundaries. Elena's experiment in deception had been emotionally costly, but it had also been invaluable in helping her understand which relationships were worth preserving and investing in versus which were primarily transactional. She had learned to distinguish between people who cared about her well-being and people who cared about what she could do for them. The knowledge had been painful when it revealed ugly truths about people she'd loved and trusted, but it had also been liberating when it confirmed the genuine affection and integrity of relationships she'd sometimes taken for granted. Elena had discovered that she was surrounded by more authentic love and fewer genuine friends than she'd previously believed, but she preferred knowing the truth to living with comfortable illusions. Elena's relationship with money had also evolved significantly. She had learned that wealth was not just about accumulating and spending resources, but about understanding the responsibility that came with financial power and using it in ways that aligned with her deepest values. The inheritance had given her the opportunity to help others, but it had also taught her that effective help required wisdom, boundaries, and sometimes the courage to say no when assistance would enable destructive behaviors. Most importantly, Elena had learned that her great-aunt's warning about money revealing people's true nature was profoundly accurate. The inheritance had acted like a catalyst in her relationships, accelerating and intensifying dynamics that had always been present but were previously subtle or hidden. Money hadn't changed the fundamental nature of the people in Elena's life, but it had revealed their true priorities and values with startling clarity. Elena continued to live more modestly than her wealth would have supported, not out of deception, but out of preference for a lifestyle that felt authentic and sustainable. She had purchased a comfortable home where Mia lived as her guest, had traveled to places she'd always wanted to see, and had established charitable foundations that reflected her commitment to education and financial literacy. But Elena's greatest satisfaction came from the knowledge that she was surrounded by relationships based on genuine mutual care rather than conditional affection or transactional expectations. The people who remained in her inner circle had proven their loyalty and authenticity through their responses to both her supposed poverty and her revealed wealth. Elena often thought about her great-aunt Vivian and felt grateful not just for the financial inheritance, but for the wisdom that had come with it. The letter warning her to be careful about whom to trust had prepared Elena to approach her wealth with appropriate caution and to use her resources as tools for understanding as well as assistance. The inheritance had given Elena financial freedom, but the experiment she'd conducted had given her something even more valuable: the knowledge of who truly loved her and whom she could trust with the most important aspects of her life. That knowledge, Elena realized, was the most precious part of her great-aunt's gift. Elena's story had become one of both material inheritance and emotional education, teaching her that true wealth lay not just in accumulating resources, but in understanding relationships, maintaining integrity, and using power responsibly. She had inherited $50 million, but she had earned something far more valuable: the wisdom to know the difference between genuine love and conditional affection, and the courage to build her life around relationships that could withstand the ultimate test of truth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.